Hello everyone, welcome back to another Commander review for Magic the Gathering. Today we are talking about Uyo Silent Prophet, who is a Moonfolk wizard, and I love the Moonfolk from the original Kamigawa block. They are so cool. Very fun, I can't wait to build around it. It is a 4/4 with a mana value of 6, 4 generic and 2 blue mana. It has the flying keyword and an activated ability. For 2 colorless mana, and return 2 lands you control to their owner's hand, copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Very cool ability. The fact that you can copy any instant or sorcery, it doesn't have to be an instant or sorcery you control, it can be any instant or sorcery, could be game-endingly powerful. However, you do need to keep in mind that if you do use this ability, you will be bouncing 2 lands back to your hand, which is pretty pricey when you're looking at the Moonfolk cost for their abilities. 2 lands is very, very high cost compared to bouncing just 1 land for your Moonfolk ability. So, very powerful. Be smart with when and how you use this ability because it is really cool. There is one rule to note with this commander. If you copy an arcane spell that has cards spliced onto it, you'll copy the spliced text as well as the original spell text. If you do not know what splice into arcane is, essentially certain arcane or non-arcane cards will have that ability. Splice into arcane, and then it will have a mana cost associated with it. If you play an arcane, if you cast, I'll make that very clear, if you cast an arcane spell and you have another spell in your hand that has splice into arcane, you can pay that extra cost of whatever the splice cost is, and you can add that text of the card from your hand onto the spell that you've cast on the stack. Essentially just adding text without having to pay to cast extra cards from your hand. So 1 card could do 5 cards worth of things if you pay enough mana for it, which is really cool. It's a great way to make your spells versatile and be able to do more than just one thing that was originally printed on it. Comparison to this would be in one of the many Ravnica sets that we've had, there was an Azorius ability called Forecast, if I remember, where you paid the forecast cost and you revealed the card from your hand, and then you did whatever that ability of the forecast was. So this is kind of similar, where you are essentially paying the splice cost of a card to put its text onto a spell that's already on the stack. It's almost like the Spellslinger version of Mutate, which is a very confusing mechanic where you are putting the effects and texts and creature types and so on and so forth of a creature card onto a creature that's already on the battlefield. This does a similar thing where you are mutating and growing the abilities of a singular spell. So the card ruling for this is just to note that when you are copying the spell that's on the stack, you will copy all of its attributes, essentially. And I really want to... I'm spending time on that detail because that applies to not just spliced spells as well. If you are picking a modal spell that says choose 1 mode or choose 2 modes, it will copy all of the chosen modes that you picked. So if you chose draw 3 cards twice, then the copy of that spell will have the same ability. It'll be draw 3 cards twice. It also applies to spells that... Oh, what is it that I'm thinking of? Modal spells, spliced spells. If a spell has like a kicker cost that you pay an additional spell to give this spell a boosted effect, you will copy whatever the boosted effect is. You don't have to pay an additional kicker cost. The same is true for Escalate, or for spree mechanics where you pay more mana to do more things, it will always copy whatever the final result of that spell is on the stack. Really cool card, really simple when you think about it, but there are some nuances in certain mechanics that can make that difficult, which is why this rule is there. Alright, so a card that synergizes with Uyo is any card that will help ramp you. In mono blue, that can be quite difficult because you don't have the traditional ramp spells that green has, but there are plenty of artifacts or lands that help put extra lands onto the battlefield. So as many of those as you can get into this deck, put them in there, especially because Uyo's cost requires 2 lands to go back into your hand instead of just the 1. It can be a very heavy cost, so taking any advantage you can to cheat lands into play will help get you going fast in this deck. And of course, the deck idea that I am building around this commander is a Moonfolk tribal deck. I want to run as many of the original Moonfolk that have this bounce land ability in the deck, and then I want to, of course, have plenty of ways to cheat lands into play. And since I am going to be cheating lands into play, I'm going to be doing a landfall deck on top of that. So it's going to be bounce lands to your hand, put lands into play, and I benefit no matter what I do. So cool engine to build around. I have a 60 card deck that is this concept exactly. I just can have 4 copies of a card instead of just 1. So it's much more powerful than what the commander version will be, I'm sure. But I already know this concept works because the 60 card deck version is really cool and it functions quite well. So in a singleton format, it might be a little bit slower, but the functionality overall will still be the same, which I'm very excited to build around. A popular deck idea on EDH Rec actually focuses on Uyo's ability to duplicate spells. Since the cost is so great by bouncing 2 lands to your hand, this deck idea really focuses on benefiting from copying that spell by allowing you to copy that spell even more times, extra times, and just doing it as much as possible by activating Uyo's ability once. So it really kind of helps maximize the value you get out of Uyo's ability, even though you still have to bounce 2 lands to your hand. So very big spell slinger. And then lastly, I always try and find a way to make this cycle of cards work in a commander deck. I think they're so silly and janky, and I love them so much. This is the Epic cycle that did come out in Kamigawa. I believe this is in the Betrayers of Kamigawa set is when these came out. But the Epic cycle is a cycle of 5 sorceries, I believe. I think they're all sorceries. Some of them may be instants, but they're all 5 spells. They have a high mana value. Generally, it's 10 mana, and they have this ability called Epic. Once you've cast this spell, the Epic ability lasts the rest of the game. For the rest of the game, you can't play spells. At the beginning of each of your upkeeps, copy this spell except for its Epic ability. You may choose a new target for the copy. So this is really cool. It's a very powerful spell. Search target opponent's library for an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land card. Put that card into play under your control. Then that player shuffles his or her library. You essentially get to steal a singular permanent card from your opponent and put it into play, which is very, very powerful. It's very expensive for its for 2025 standard era of Commander, because obviously 10 mana to steal a single card is pretty high. The fact that you can do it multiple times throughout a game is really cool. Uyo specifically, I think, would be a great commander to try and build this janky build around, because it can copy the Eternal Dominion spell. At the beginning of the rest of your upkeep, copy the spell except for its. You may choose new targets for the copy. Yes. So so you are copying the spell. You're putting it's going onto the stack. That means Uyo can copy it, so you can steal 2 cards from your opponents. If you go around and put in the things where you are doubling up even more of those triggers, that's awesome. And if you are playing cards like Terrain Generator, where it's activated abilities, you're not actually having to cast spells to put those lands into play, so you can ramp out really fast and be able to use Uyo's ability multiple times. If you're really heavily reliant on abilities, rather than trying to cast spells over and over and over again for the rest of the game, and you can get these spell copiers into play early on, you could set yourself up for this crazy Eternal Dominion turn where you are just copying it tons of times every single turn, and you're stealing all of your opponent's stuff. And of all the colors to build around this epic cycle, blue is probably the best because blue has multiple ways to give you multiple upkeep steps. And that is extremely crucial because you get a copy of Eternal Dominion for each of your upkeeps. So if you have the Sphinx, that gives you a second beginning phase where you get an untap, upkeep, and draw. You get an upkeep there. So then you get another Eternal Dominion. If you have things like something haze, Mystifying Haze. It's one of the old enchantments that you can enchant a player, and they get an additional upkeep after the first one, essentially. Paradox Haze, that's it, Paradox Haze. If you have Paradox Haze, you enchant yourself, you get an additional upkeep, which means you get a third copy of Eternal Dominion. There's so many ways that you can increase the number of upkeep steps you have without having to cast spells late in the game, and it's so cool. I think of all the epic spells that you could build a deck around, this one is probably the easiest, and it's still one of the coolest that you can build around because you're going to be essentially playing everyone else's decks and trying to like survive as long as you can up until the point that you can actually cast the spell to use its ability. So really cool card. I love the challenge of building around the epic cycle of cards, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts about this idea. And that is going to do it for Uyo Silent Prophet. A little bit of a longer video for these commander reviews. Again, I really wanted to stress the importance and power of their ability and how it works with spells on the stack, whether the spells have been spliced or escalated or spreed or chosen modes and stuff like that. So really cool card. 2 is better than 1. I love that strength, being able to just copy up any spell. You don't have to copy just your spells with Uyo's ability. You can copy anyone's spell. So if someone does try to play a giant burn spell to blow out the whole table, you could copy that spell, and since your copy will be higher up on the stack, yours will resolve first. So if someone tries to burn you out with like a giant burn spell, you could burn them out first, maybe, theoretically. You could theoretically burn them out first with your copy that will resolve before the original copy. So like the implications of this commander are absolutely crazy because you can build a deck around this commander to amplify your own spells, but you can also copy any instant or sorcery spell. That's why this card is so cool. And it's also why this card is so popular to build around. There are lots of different copying abilities or combos or whatever you want to do. There are so many different ways that you can use Uyo's ability with instant or sorceries, which is why this commander has the rank of S. Lots of popularity, lots of different deck ideas you can build around. So lots of potential there for whatever you want to do. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys so much for your support and your feedback. If you have any other feedback or suggestions or questions, maybe deck ideas or cards that synergize well with Uyo that I did not mention, let me know in the comments below. I love to read your guys' comments. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!